Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Coda Gallagher, and today is August 18th. On this day in 2003, a tragedy in Newfoundland shocked Canada and revealed devastating flaws in its legal system. 1-year-old Zachary Turner died in a murder-suicide at the hands of his mother, Dr. Shirley Jane Turner. At the time, she was out on bail awaiting extradition to the United States to face charges for the murder of Zachary's father, Dr. Andrew Bagby. Today, we're talking about the murder of Zachary Turner, a case that inspired one of the most devastating true crime documentaries ever made. Let's get started. On the morning of August 18, 2003, Shirley Turner walked into a pharmacy in St. John's, Newfoundland. She picked up a prescription for lorazepam, a powerful sedative that's used for anxiety. That afternoon, she mixed a fatal dose of the medication into her 13-month-old son Zachary's bottle of formula, and she took some herself. Hours later, Shirley walked to Foxtrot Marina on Conception Bay. She secured Zachary to her chest using her sweater, climbed onto a fishing wharf, and jumped into the cold Atlantic waters. When the bodies were recovered, authorities found Zachary had been rendered unconscious by the sedative. The coroner later determined that he had not suffered. But that detail was small comfort in the face of what had happened. A little boy, already deprived of his father, was now gone. Killed by the person who was meant to love and protect him the most. The public shock quickly turned to outrage. How could a woman facing extradition for murder be granted custody of a baby? Why had the courts, the child welfare system, and her medical supervisors all failed to intervene? Long before that day at the marina, there were warning signs, and those signs were clear, documented, and consistent. Shirley Turner had a history of volatile, manipulative behavior. In the late 1990s, while in her medical residency in Newfoundland, her supervising physician described her as entitled and combative. She accused him of unfair treatment, missing work without explanation, and even falsifying records. In his words, she was, quote, superficial, manipulative, possibly a psychopath, end quote. Her personal life told a similar story. Between 1996 and 1999, she harassed an ex-boyfriend, Miles Doucette, with repeated phone calls, surprise visits, and even a physical confrontation. The harassment ended with her attempting suicide outside of his apartment, leaving behind a bouquet and 2 notes that read, "I am not evil, just sick." Then came November 2001. Her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Andrew Bagby, was found shot to death in Pennsylvania. Evidence placed Shirley near the crime scene. She had driven across the border, purchased ammunition, and contacted Andrew shortly before his death. She fled back to Canada but was arrested and began fighting extradition back to the United States. But by then, she was pregnant with Andrew's child, Zachary. In early 2003, while awaiting extradition, she was granted bail by a Newfoundland judge. The reasoning he gave was that her alleged crime was not directed, quote, at the public at large, end quote. The court placed Zachary in her custody and gave his paternal grandparents, David and Kate Bagby, only supervised visitation. Her psychiatrist, Dr. John Doucette, not related to Miles, would later face professional discipline for helping post her bail, despite knowing her troubled history. When Zachary died, the grief was overwhelming. But so was the demand for answers. Newfoundland and Labrador's Child and Youth Advocate launched an unprecedented public inquiry into how the system had failed him. The 2006 Turner Review and Investigation was 172 pages of painful revelations. It showed how critical information about Shirley's past, Her harassment of her partners, her troubling workplace behavior, and a pending murder charge was spread across different agencies, and none of them shared their files effectively. The report condemned the court's decision to grant her bail without a full psychiatric risk assessment, especially while she had sole care of an infant. It criticized child welfare for treating the situation as a simple custody matter instead of a child protection emergency. Social workers often relied on Shirley's own self-reporting, and they never coordinated closely with U.S. authorities who were handling the Bagby case. Perhaps the most damning line in the entire report was this, quote, "Zachary's death was preventable," end quote. For David and Kate Bagby, who'd been warning anyone who would listen, the report confirmed their worst fears. The system hadn't just failed Zachary, it had placed him directly in harm's way. Even in the months before the murder-suicide, warning signs piled up. Friends, medical colleagues, and the Bagbys all voiced concerns about Shirley's mental health and her unpredictable behavior. Some fear that she might harm Zachary if she felt cornered. But every time, officials decided that there was no reason to remove the child. Bail hearings focused almost entirely on whether she would flee, not on whether Zachary was safe in her care. The inquiry later concluded that this was a fatal flaw in thinking. Judges and social workers had been overly cautious about infringing on her parental rights, even though she was under indictment for murder. In doing so, they forgot that protecting a child's safety must come first. On August 18, 2003, that oversight turned deadly. For the Bagbys, losing their grandson just a year and a half after losing their son was almost unimaginable. But their grief became fuel for change. They lobbied for new laws to prevent anything like this from happening again. Public outrage backed them, and in 2010, Parliament passed Bill C-464, known as Zachary's Bill. It gave Canadian courts explicit power to deny bail if it was necessary to protect the safety of children under 18. The case also reached a global audience through the 2008 documentary Dear Zachary, A Letter to His Son About His Father. Filmmaker Kurt Keown, a close friend of Andrew Bagby, had originally intended it as a gift to Zachary so that he could one day know his father. Instead, it became a devastating chronicle of the legal failures that led to his death, and a tribute to the resilience of David and Kate Bagby. If you haven't seen this documentary, you must. In my opinion, it's one of the best ever made. And I've never cried harder during a movie than I did at this one. Even now, just thinking about it, you have to see this if you haven't. Today, Zachary's name is a permanent reminder in Canadian law that bail decisions must weigh the safety of children, not just the risk to the public. His story continues to be taught in law schools, discussed in child welfare training, and remembered by anyone who has seen the documentary's final heartbreaking scenes. On August 18, 2003, a little boy's life ended, not because the danger was hidden or random, but because it was ignored. Zachary Turner's death forced Canada to confront the dangerous gaps in the justice system and child protection laws. And while reform came too late for him, his story stands as a warning. When systems fail to protect the most vulnerable, the cost is measured in lives. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Zachary's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!